This is not just a story, it's a journey of courage, loss, and a love that refuses to fade. Like and subscribe now so you don't miss the next love story on Quispa. The cold air was sharper than Grace expected as she stepped out of the taxi onto the busy streets of Seoul. It was early spring, 2011, but the city still held the chill of winter in its breath. She pulled her heavy coat tighter around her broad shoulders, feeling the unfamiliar weight of a school bag on her chest, and glanced up at the towering gates of Seoul High School. The black iron gates, etched with gold details, gleamed in the pale sunlight, a silent declaration of the prestige behind them. Grace's heart thudded as she walked beneath the arch, the sounds of chatter and footsteps swirling around her. Students in navy uniforms passed by, their faces pale and their delicate features framed by silky, straight black hair. They moved with practiced grace, slender and poised, the very picture of Korean beauty ideals. And then there was Grace, her rich dark skin glowing warmly in the pale light, her full lips and high cheekbones boldly defying the uniformity of the crowd. Her hair, styled naturally in thick, coiled braids adorned with colorful beads, swayed with every step she took. She was taller and fuller than most girls around her, with curves that the rigid standards of her new school didn't know how to welcome. As she made her way to homeroom, a hush seemed to ripple through the corridors. The word transfer student hung in the air, mingling with whispered comments about her skin, her height, and the confident way she carried herself. Grace swallowed the lump in her throat and pressed forward, reminding herself this was just the beginning. Her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Park, introduced her quietly. "Class, this is Grace Okafor, joining us from Lagos, Nigeria. Please be kind and help her adjust." Polite nods met her gaze, but beneath them lay a chill of unspoken judgments. In the lunchroom, Grace found a quiet corner to eat alone. The scent of kimchi and rice filled the air, but the looks she received stung sharper than the cold wind outside. A group of girls near the door exchanged glances and giggled when she passed by, their whispers too low to catch but heavy enough to weigh on her spirit. One boy's snide comment, "She's so tall and different, like she stepped out of a different world," was loud enough for her to hear. She kept her eyes on her tray, wishing the ground would swallow her whole. But in the midst of the haze of discomfort, a presence shifted near her table. A tall boy, with unruly black hair and a basketball tucked under his arm, stood quietly beside her. "You dropped this," he said, holding out her history textbook she'd accidentally left behind. Grace looked up, surprised. Their eyes met, warm, genuine, unguarded. "Thank you," she whispered. The boy smiled softly. "I'm Jihoon." And for the first time since she arrived, Grace felt a flicker of hope. The next few weeks became a mix of quiet endurance and small kindnesses. Grace found refuge in the school library, where the air was thick with the scent of aging books and dust. It was there she saw Jihoon most often, usually with a book in hand or leaning back in a chair, tossing a basketball lightly in one hand when no one was watching. Though the whispers and sideways glances followed her like a shadow, Jihoon was a rare constant. When other students made comments about her skin or laughed about her height, he would sometimes step in, his voice calm but firm. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult day filled with whispered insults and cold shoulders, Grace sat alone in the library's far corner. Jihoon slid into the seat beside her, placing a packet of bread on the table. "You didn't eat lunch," he observed quietly. Grace looked up, surprised. "How did you know?" He shrugged. "I noticed." They shared the bread in silence, and for a moment, the world outside the library walls felt less harsh. Their friendship grew slowly but steadily. Jihoon was curious about Lagos, asking about the markets, the food, the music. Grace, in turn, began to share stories she had rarely told anyone, about her childhood climbing mango trees, the festive sounds of her neighborhood, the warm nights by the ocean. As spring melted into summer, the ice between them thinned. Their conversations became lighter, their shared smiles more frequent. Jihoon introduced Grace to the secret corners of Seoul, hidden noodle stalls, quiet rooftop gardens, parks where the cherry blossoms bloomed in a riot of pink and white. Despite the growing closeness, the world around them remained unkind. Rumors started to swirl. Some students whispered that Jihoon's family wouldn't approve of their friendship. Others speculated on the reason for Grace's transfer, weaving tales that hurt more than words. One day, as they walked home beneath the warm summer sun, Jihoon took Grace's hand in his. It was tentative, almost shy, but it was a promise. A promise that despite the whispers and the cold stares, he saw her. He chose her. But life, with its cruel twists, was far from done with them. Summer became their season. Seoul's streets were alive with the hum of cicadas and the smell of street food sizzling on open grills. Grace and Jihoon found new corners of the city together. Tiny noodle shops tucked behind narrow alleys, ice cream stands along the Han River, rooftops where they could watch the city lights glitter like stars. It started quietly. One evening, after they'd spent an afternoon walking along the Gyeonggi stream, Jihoon reached for her hand. There was no fanfare, no dramatic pause, just his warm fingers curling around hers as if it had always been that way. She didn't pull away. From that moment, something shifted. They didn't announce it. In school, they still acted like friends, sitting together in the library, occasionally walking home after class, but when no one was watching, they were something more. Texts turned into late-night calls. Library study sessions turned into whispered jokes, knees brushing under the table. On one rainy afternoon, Jihoon brought her to the old basketball court near his neighborhood. The paint on the lines had faded, the nets frayed, but he said it was where he'd first learned to play. They practiced shooting until her hair clung damply to her forehead. When she missed a shot for the third time, she groaned, turning away. "Hey," he said, stepping closer. His hand came up to brush a wet braid from her cheek. The look in his eyes made her breath catch. She didn't remember who moved first, but suddenly his lips were on hers, warm, hesitant, tasting faintly of rain and mint gum. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for a while," he murmured. So had she. But for every moment like that, there was the shadow of reality. It started with small signs. The way Jihoon's phone would buzz during their time together, his expression tightening as he read the messages. One afternoon, as they sat in the library, she caught sight of the sender's name on his phone. "Mother." He sighed, putting the phone face down. "They want me home earlier," he muttered. A week later, she learned why. They were walking near his neighborhood when a black sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out, tall, impeccably dressed, her hair perfectly styled. Jihoon froze. "Jihoon, the woman said sharply in Korean. "Get in the car." He straightened. "I'm with someone." Her gaze slid to Grace. It wasn't openly hostile, but it was assessing. Like she was studying something she hadn't expected to see. "This is Grace," Jihoon said after a moment. "She's my," he hesitated, then said, "friend." His mother's lips curved into a thin smile. "Nice to meet you," she said in accented English. Then, switching back to Korean, "We'll talk at home." Jihoon's shoulders were tense as he got into the car. The door closed, and just like that, he was gone. After that day, things felt different. He still found ways to see her, but there was a restlessness about him, as if he was fighting something he couldn't name. One night, he called her out to meet at the small cafe they'd been to before. The place was nearly empty, the air warm with the smell of coffee. "My parents found out we're more than friends," he said quietly, hands wrapped around his cup. "They are not happy." She swallowed. "Because of me." "Because you're not who they pictured for me," he admitted, his jaw tight. "They have this idea. About my future. About who I should be with." She stared down at her cup, her voice barely above a whisper. "So what happens now?" "I don't care what they say," he said, leaning forward. "I'm not letting them decide this for me. For us." It should have comforted her. But that night, lying in bed, she thought about the way his mother had looked at her, and the certainty in her heart wavered. Still, their time together grew more intense, almost as if they knew it was fragile. They watched the first autumn leaves fall by the river, shared steaming cups of tteokbokki in the park, and kissed under streetlights when the world was quiet. But the pressure around them kept building. Jihoon started missing basketball practice to be with her, which earned him warnings from his coach. Rumors in school became louder. Someone scrawled "go back home" on the back of one of her notebooks. Through it all, Jihoon stayed by her side, until the day he didn't. It happened in late October. She arrived at school and felt the difference immediately. His seat in class was empty. She checked the library at lunch, nothing. By the end of the day, she was dialing his number, only to hear the automated voice tell her the line was no longer in service. The following morning, Mrs. Park announced casually, "Jihoon has transferred to another school. Let's wish him well." The words felt like ice water down her spine. No warning. No explanation. Just gone. Grace didn't remember leaving the classroom. Her feet carried her through the corridors on instinct, past the hum of conversation and the scuff of shoes against polished floors, until she found herself outside. The autumn air cut against her skin, sharp and cold, as if it wanted to make sure she stayed awake for this moment. Gone. The word ricocheted inside her chest, loud enough to drown out everything else. The days after Jihoon's disappearance moved strangely, too slow and too fast all at once. She kept expecting him to turn the corner in the library, tossing that basketball in one hand, or to drop into the seat beside her in class with that crooked half-smile. But he didn't. The whispers started again, sharper now, their edges aimed at her. I heard his parents sent him abroad. No, they just didn't want him distracted. But she scared him off. Grace tried to ignore them, burying herself in textbooks and the comfort of the library's dusty corners. But the silence where Jihoon used to be felt heavier than the stairs. One rainy afternoon, about 2 weeks later, she found something in her locker. It was a folded scrap of notebook paper, the handwriting instantly familiar, slanted, a little messy, with the occasional smudge where his hand had dragged across the ink. Grace. I'm sorry. I didn't have time to explain. They made the decision fast. And I couldn't. I didn't want you to try to fight for me and get hurt because of it. You changed the way I see the world. You made me braver. And I wish we had more time. Remember the old basketball court? It's ours. Jay. She read it over and over until the ink blurred from the dampness on her fingers. That weekend, she went to the court. The paint was still faded, the nets still frayed. The rain from earlier had left small puddles in the cracks of the asphalt. She sat on the bench, the letter in her pocket, and let the city's hum surround her. She could almost see him there, teasing her about her terrible free throws, brushing the hair from her cheek. The ache in her chest wasn't sharp anymore, it was a slow, deep thing. But beneath it was something steadier. Grace had come to Seoul as an outsider, and for a while, Jihoon had been her anchor. Now he was gone. But she was still here. She took a deep breath, picked up a stray basketball someone had left behind, and stepped onto the court. The first shot missed. So did the second. But the third swished clean through. And for the first time since that October morning, she smiled. 3 years later, spring 2014. The cold air in Seoul didn't bite as sharply as it used to. Grace had learned its moods, how the wind cut through the city in early March and softened in April when the cherry blossoms began their fleeting bloom. She was 18 now, taller, stronger, her braids longer but still adorned with beads that clicked softly when she walked. She wore her Seojin high uniform with quiet confidence, the same navy blazer that had once felt like armor now just another layer of her day. The first year after Jihoon left had been the hardest. The library became more than a refuge, it became her second home. She read until the Korean on the page no longer slowed her down, until she could trade witty remarks with classmates without tripping over the words. She joined the debate club, then the basketball team, almost on a dare to herself. And somewhere along the way, the whispers faded. Not because they stopped, but because they no longer reached her. Now, she sat in the back corner of a bustling cafe near Hongdae, textbooks spread open, the smell of coffee and cinnamon curling through the air. She was reviewing for her university entrance exams when the sound of a basketball thumping on pavement drifted in from outside. It tugged at something deep in her chest. She looked out the window. A small group of guys were messing around with a ball in the alley beside the cafe, laughing as they passed it between them. One of them, tall, broad-shouldered, turned, and for a split second, Grace's heart forgot how to beat. Jihoon. Older, sharper around the edges, his hair shorter now, but still with that familiar messiness. He laughed at something one of his friends said, the sound muffled through the glass but achingly familiar. Grace froze, one hand gripping her pen. She hadn't thought about what she'd say if she ever saw him again. In her mind, the moment had been scripted, he'd spot her instantly, they'd lock eyes, words would tumble out that explained everything. But now, with him just meters away, all she felt was the weight of 3 years' worth of silence pressing in on her. He turned again, facing the cafe. His gaze skimmed over the windows, casual, until it stopped, until it landed on her. His smile faltered, just for a second. And then, slowly, he started walking toward the door. Grace's fingers tightened around her pen as the bell above the cafe door chimed. He stepped inside, the warmth of the cafe wrapping around him, melting the faint chill from his skin. Up close, the changes were even sharper. He was taller than she remembered, his jawline more defined, his shoulders broader. But his eyes, those were the same. Warm brown, steady, and carrying something she couldn't name. For a moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the espresso machine and the murmur of conversations around them filled the space where words should have been.
Jihoon was the first to speak.
Grace. Her name in his voice was like a key turning in a lock she hadn't realized she'd kept shut.
She swallowed.
Jihoon. He took a step closer, hesitant, like he was testing the ground between them. I didn't think. His voice trailed off, and he let out a breathy laugh. I mean, I didn't expect to see you here. Same, she said softly, though the word felt too small for everything twisting inside her.
There was a pause, the kind that carried years inside it.
You look different, he said, his gaze searching her face. Stronger. I had to be, she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, maybe. Grace, I owe you an explanation, she cut in, the edge in her voice surprising even herself. He winced, but nodded.
Yeah.
I wanted to explain.
That day, they gave me no choice.
I thought if I told you, you'd try to fight for me, and I couldn't. You couldn't let me get hurt, she finished, the old wound reopening with the memory of his letter. Exactly.
He ran a hand through his hair. It doesn't make it right. I should have said goodbye properly.
I should have done a lot of things differently. Her chest ached, but she kept her voice calm.
Why now, Jihoon?
Why are you here? He hesitated, glancing toward the window where the sound of his friend's laughter drifted in. Because I've been back for months, and every time I thought about seeing you, He stopped, then met her eyes. I was afraid you wouldn't want to see me. Grace looked at him for a long moment. There was so much she wanted to say, about the years without him, about how she'd learned to stand on her own, about the piece of her life he'd taken with him when he left.
But instead, she said, sit down. Jihoon's lips twitched into the faintest smile.
He pulled out the chair across from her, the air between them thick with unspoken history. As he sat, she realized something. This wasn't just about what happened back then.
It was about what would happen next. Later that week.
The rain had stopped by the time Grace stepped out of the cafe that day, but the air still felt heavy, like the clouds were holding back another downpour. Jihoon had asked if they could meet again, to talk properly, as he put it. She had agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly because the 3 years of questions in her chest refused to stay unanswered. Now, 2 days later, she sat in a quiet tea house in Insadong, the kind of place where the wood smelled faintly of old rain and the tea came in delicate ceramic cups. She'd chosen it because it was neutral, safe.
Not theirs.
Jihoon arrived late, hair damp from the drizzle, a faint crease between his brows. He ordered tea without asking what she wanted, another old habit, and sat across from her. I'm just going to say it, he began, voice low. The reason I left Seojin wasn't just because my parents didn't approve of us. Grace kept her expression still. Go on. They arranged for me to transfer to a school where I'd be close to someone. Someone they wanted me to marry someday. She blinked, the words almost absurd.
Marry?
At 17.
It wasn't official, he said quickly.
Just grooming the connection.
She's the daughter of my mother's business partner.
Their companies were negotiating a merger, and putting us together was supposed to make the deal cleaner. More personal. Grace's stomach twisted. And you went along with it.
His jaw tightened.
I didn't have a choice. My parents made it clear, this was about the family's future. About the empire they've been building for decades. They told me if I refused, I'd be cut off completely.
Her voice was sharp.
So you stayed with her all these years?
Stayed, he repeated bitterly. If you can call it that.
He stopped, searching for words.
She's everything my parents like. Polished.
Wealthy.
Perfect on paper. But she's arrogant. Cruel to people she thinks are beneath her. I couldn't stand it.
Every time I was with her, I felt like I was disappearing. Grace folded her arms, the beads in her braids clicking softly.
And yet you didn't leave.
I couldn't,
he said quietly. Not until the merger was finalized.
And when it was, I left.
I came back here because I needed to breathe again.
Because, he hesitated, then met her eyes.
Because I kept thinking about you. About the basketball court.
About the girl who never fit into their boxes, and didn't care. Her chest ached, but she didn't look away.
So now what? She asked.
You're still tied to them.
still tied to her.
I don't love her, Grace.
I never did.
But if I walk away from my family now, I lose everything, every privilege, every opportunity they've given me.
And I don't know if I'm ready for that. Grace sat back, her mind spinning.
3 years ago, she would have said yes to him without thinking. Now, she had her own dreams, university, nursing, a future she'd carved with her own hands.
She wasn't the girl who had needed saving in the library. You're asking me to, what? She said slowly.
Wait for you to decide if love is worth more than your empire?
Put my life on hold while you make up your mind. His face fell. I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can choose you.
That I will choose you.
Her tea had gone cold. And if you can't?
He looked at her for a long time, his silence heavier than any answer. Grace stood, tucking her notebook under her arm.
I've worked too hard to get here, Jihoon.
I'm not throwing it away to be part of your maybe. She turned to leave, but his voice followed her. I'm not giving up, he said, firm now.
I made the wrong choice once.
I'm not making it again.
Grace didn't look back. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to follow.
The leaves were turning again, their edges brushed with fire. Grace had been walking home from evening study when her steps slowed in front of the old basketball court. She hadn't been here in months, the paint still faded, the nets still frayed, but the place still carried ghosts.
She almost kept walking. Almost. But then she saw him.
Jihoon stood at the free throw line, a ball in his hands. He shot, missed, and caught the rebound in a single motion. When he looked up, their eyes locked across the court. Grace.
His voice carried easily in the crisp air.
She crossed her arms. What are you doing here?
He took a breath, the kind you take before jumping into cold water. I left. The company. My parents.
The merger deal. It's done, but I told them I won't marry her. I told them I'm choosing you. The words hung between them, the echo of the ball bouncing against asphalt fading into silence. Grace's heart thudded. A part of her had dreamed of this moment for years, the grand gesture, the declaration. But instead of sweeping relief, she felt the weight of her textbooks in her bag, the ache in her shoulders from weeks of study, the quiet certainty of the life she'd been building without him.
Jihoon, she shook her head.
I'm not the same girl you left.
I know, he said quickly. That's why I'm here. Because I want to know who you are now. Because he swallowed. I can build again. Without them. With you.
Her voice was soft, but steady.
I'm about to take my entrance exams. I want to be a nurse. That's my whole world right now. I can't give that up, not even for you. I'm not asking you to give it up. But you're asking me to make space for something I'm not ready for, she cut in gently.
And if I say yes now, I'm afraid I'll lose myself in the middle of your fight with your family. I've spent too long finding my place here.
Jihoon's hands tightened on the ball.
So that's it. She stepped closer, the wind lifting the beads in her braids so they clicked softly like wind chimes.
No, that's not it. You found the courage to choose me, Jihoon. Now I'm choosing me.
If our paths meet again someday, when we're both where we need to be, maybe we'll see. He let out a slow breath, nodding, though disappointment clouded his eyes. You've changed.
Yeah, she said, a small smile tugging at her lips.
That was the point. They stood there for a moment longer, the court between them, the autumn air cool against their skin. Then Grace turned, her step steady, her future clear. Behind her, the sound of a basketball hitting the asphalt echoed in the fading light. 5 years later, snow dusted the streets of Seoul, soft and quiet under the glow of streetlights. Inside the hospital, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and brewed coffee. Grace moved briskly down the corridor, her white coat swaying with her steps. The name badge on her chest read Grace Okafor, RN. She'd made it. Years of study, countless exams, late nights in the library. Every moment had led here. She was a nurse now, working in the city's busiest trauma center. It was near the end of her shift when the paramedics rushed in with an emergency. Male, late 20s, head trauma, possible concussion, vitals unstable. One called as they wheeled in a stretcher. Grace stepped forward to assist, her training taking over. She adjusted the oxygen mask, checked the 4-line, and then, her breath caught. The man's hair was damp with melted snow, his face pale beneath the bruises. But she knew those eyes, even half-closed. Jihoon. Her voice cracked, but her hands kept moving, steady and precise. His gaze flickered, trying to focus. "Grace?"
The sound was barely more than a whisper.
"You're going to be fine," she said firmly, even as her heart thundered. "You're in the hospital. I'm here." The team moved quickly, CT scan, stitches, fluids. Grace stayed by his side through it all, her voice the anchor pulling him back each time his eyes started to close. Hours later, when the chaos settled and he was stable, she sat beside his bed in the dim recovery room.
Snowflakes tapped softly against the window.
"You saved me," he murmured, his voice rough.
She smiled faintly.
"That's my job."
"No," he said, shaking his head slowly. "Not just tonight."
"You've been saving me since the first day I saw you at Seoul High." Her chest tightened. "Jihoon. I don't care about the empire, the money, any of it," he said, his eyes locking on hers.
"I've wasted too many years without you.
If you'll have me, Grace, I want to be with you. Forever." She searched his face, seeing not the boy she'd met in the library, not the young man on the basketball court, but someone who had fought his own battles and come out the other side.
Someone who had finally chosen freely.
Her voice was soft, but certain. "Then you'd better not scare me like this again."
A ghost of a smile tugged at his lips. "Deal."
She reached for his hand, their fingers lacing together, warm against the cold outside. And for the first time in years, Grace felt no tug-of-war between love and her dreams, because somehow, she had both. Snow falls softly over Seoul tonight, and somewhere, between the echoes of the past and the promise of tomorrow, two hearts are deciding their forever. Will love win, or will life pull them apart once again? If you've felt every heartbeat of this journey, hit subscribe and join us on this unforgettable love story ride, because this isn't over yet.